Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today we got AJ Ramler in the building. Tell us where you are from, AJ. Where are you dialing in from today? The
Sure,
South?
I'm from Dallas, Texas, Oak Cliff.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. Welcome to the lab,
Hey,
man. We had to have you in the lab.
Yeah, it's 70 degrees today in January. So for all you people up in the cold, come on down. Dallas is the place to be.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I was just out in I'm based out of Georgia, and I'm between the East Coast and Georgia, and it's just wonderful to be out there in the nice weather, man.
Oh yeah, I was sitting on a patio today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just real quick, so I want to get right into the background, all right? The whole, who is AJ? Because I watch your stuff, and I think you're doing such a great job of communicating with the community. What you're about. Most importantly, what you're doing, you're providing a lot of value. And I want to just take a step back into, I think it's always fascinating to find out, where did people get started in real estate? Where did they get started as an individual? So I like knowing the person behind the business because it's a people's business. So why don't you tell us who was AJ in the beginning
Sure.
of building what you're building, which is precious, and then who are you now?
Yeah, so I knew from a fairly young age, actually, that I wanted to do real estate. I didn't know what real estate was when I was a child, obviously, but I actually have a goal sheet from when I was like 14. It's like, I want to be a realtor with Ebby Holiday, who's this big real estate agency in Dallas. Now I'd probably be a little embarrassed to work for him. But anyway, back then I knew at least something. I was like, I like this real estate thing. I like working with my hands. I wanted to be a carpenter a little bit. So I was kind of in that mojo, and graduated high school and went to college and majored in real estate finance. I barely passed, got out of college alive. I was on academic probation. School was horrible for me. They basically pushed me through high school, but managed to slip by somehow. So that was 2012 when I graduated.
Okay.
Graduated, and then I got married also. Actually, still in college, I got married. So I graduated, and I knew, I guess intuitively, because this is kind of before Bigger Pockets kind of had the whole house hacking movement and all that stuff, but I knew intuitively, like, look, I can go buy a fourplex and live in one of them, and that's going to work for me, and I can live there for free. So Bigger Pockets existed, but not as a podcast yet. So that was 2012. And we put that quadplex under contract and purchased that, closed on that in January of 2013, which was actually the first Bigger Pockets podcast came out in January 13. So it was good timing. I kind of grew up with that, listening to them. And they helped me a lot through that process. So I still encourage people to, whenever people reach out to me, ask me a bunch of questions, I'm like, go listen to 30, 40 podcasts, then call me. And I'll talk to you all day long, but go listen to there's so many good podcasts out there now. People do themselves a disservice to not take the time to listen to them.
Yeah. So let me just do a little quick recap, because you said you started with a quad, right?
Yeah, correct. It actually was a fourplex.
Yeah.
And then it had a basement, and we converted the basement into 2 more units and lived in one of those units.
Okay, cool.
But we still use a conventional loan to lock it up. So
conventional loan right out of school. So I want to take a step back, AJ, because I know you do a really good job about talking about financial literacy, and I'm wondering originally what you said you kind of fell into it, but we talked about Bigger Pockets a little bit, but at what point did you feel that you knew this coming out of school, or you learned it while you were in school, or what was that phase of like that switch of, okay, this makes sense, or maybe it's not even as complicated as I'm making it sound, but what was that process?
If I'm honest about it, so I majored in real estate finance.
Oh, nice.
But I probably learned a little bit more from Bigger Pockets than I did from college. coming out of the gates. I had one professor in college that was just really good at hammering. He'd always tell people, go find your rich uncle and buy a 20-unit apartment complex in the worst neighborhood you can find, and then just pay it off and live in it, and like you're gonna be set. So he kind of pounded that into my head a little bit, and we learned cap rates and like the basic, what I think of now as being the basics, you know. But I didn't really understand those things. You know, you can talk about a cap rate all day long. You don't understand that until you're like looking at, you know, hundreds of deals and everything starts kind of making sense along the way.
Yeah.
So that's why I like the podcast forum, is you just get to listen to people that are ahead of you and using the tricks and all that stuff. So.
Wow. No, that I'm glad you mentioned that. And earlier we were talking about bigger pockets, and one of my, cause I'll get a lot of people, I'm sure just like you, who message me and DM me, hey, I'm trying to get started. And one of the tests that I always say is like, find me on Bigger Pockets and connect with me. And if you don't, then I know you're not willing to just connect with me. Cause like once you're in, it's like my invite. It's like my guest invite to, like you said, a network where I will sell my first deal from a Bigger Pockets connection. Like I went to go, you know, sit down and we grabbed dinner and I offered value and it was just that. So same with the masterminds. And so I would really say anyone who's listening to it, it's free. It's free information. And I think it's just, it's not by chance that AJ sitting with us here and he did his due diligence to get educated. So good for you, man.
But you know what's crazy about what you it continues to blow my mind is, because I get people hitting me on Instagram and other platforms all the time just saying, you know, I want to learn about real estate, I want to do this, blah, blah. But we do a meetup group, and I host a meetup group with this other kind of thing I'm working on. We do, you know, probably once every 6 weeks. People don't show up. Like, people message me, I want to do real estate, I want to learn about this. But so it's so easy to just type it out. Oh, I want to buy a rent house. But to actually like do anything, to just show up, you know, you're past 80% of your competition.
I love
just
that.
Literally like getting off your ass and coming to drink some beer with some guys that know what they're doing. It just blows my mind. It's hard for me to even believe sometimes, you know.
And that's why I'm a huge fan of yours too, and because I've been looking at a lot of your content, and one thing you're always preaching about is consistency, even in your message. And I think the good news is, if you're listening, whether you're a novice investor or you're at scale, it's just, if you consistently continue to do the compound effect by continuously learning, like people come to me like I'm a student of the game. Like I'm learning from you right now, and I'm really excited, just like the community is, and that hasn't stopped. And I'm sure we'll get into that later, where you're currently at today, and see how you've kind of you know, take us maybe a step forward. From you started with a quad, and now where are you at today? And I'm not so much focused on the number, but more about the process. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So first off, what I want to talk about, so I started with that quad, and that was in January of 13, and it took me until December of 14. So basically 2 years to buy my second deal.
Wow.
So people got to hear that, you know?
Yeah.
It took 2 years. Like I had one deal, I lived in it. It took 2 years. We saved my wife's entire salary. She was a teacher. I was doing sales. I was making $38,000 a year. That was part of this part where I screwed up, is everyone was telling me the real estate market was trash because it was, you know, we were coming out of 08. So in college, the whole time I was in college, people were telling me the real estate market's falling apart. So I graduated and was like, I'm going to get a sales job. I can do sales. So I kind of screwed up not jumping straight into real estate. Even though I bought the quad, career-wise, I was doing sales. So I got a job doing sales. I was making $38,000. My wife was a teacher with Dallas and making probably like $48,000. So we lived on my money and we saved all her money. And it took us 2 years. So it's patience and consistency. And you know, that's another thing I talk about a lot is you need to be, if you want to be a successful real estate investor that grows at any kind of decent rate, you need to be thinking about what saving 40% of your income looks like. If you're not at least thinking about that and having that conversation with yourself or your partner, you know, that's a very good starting place to at least have that conversation. And maybe it's not 40% for you. Maybe you come back and say, I can only do 20%.
Okay, so I want to touch on that because I love that conversation, right? And but before we even get away from that, that's gonna be the next thing. You mentioned 2 years, and actually, when you mentioned 2 years, actually, my mind was going at a different place, and I wasn't sure if the listeners caught on to that. But when you said 2 years, do you look at that as part of the process, or that you wish you would have maybe done more? I guess where were you
It's part
going
of the
with that?
process.
Yeah,
It was part
okay.
of the process. I was not raising money, and
Mhm.
so everything was self-funded. And the quad that we had bought, we had a pretty big renovation on over the years, so a lot of our funds were going to that. It just takes time to save the money to buy the next deal, right? So now
Would you have done it the same way, AJ?
um, I would have learned how to use hard money a lot earlier. I had this huge hard money was repulsive to me when I first entered the real estate market, because you just hear negative things about it, and I would have learned how to use it. It's a tool. I'm not gonna say you should use it all the time, but it's a tool that you should know how to use. And I think if I'd known how to use it early on, or found someone else that had some money, easy in 2020 vision, right? It was 2013,
Oh, it's hindsight 2020.
2014, right? I mean, the market was going nuts. I should have bought everything I looked at, right? I should have been taking out credit card loans and buying deals. So easy to say that in retrospect. I'm happy with how I did things and turned out. So I don't want to say
Yeah. No. And I think where I'm going with this is I'm always about learning from practitioners and learning from the people who step in the lab. That's what, as practitioners. So I always like to think of, I think that question, it's never like, oh, I wish I would have done things this way, because then it leads to something else. But I think what lesson did I learn from that? So that's interesting. You mentioned the tool. It's a good tool. I know people, often in forums, or they'll reach out and say, or even have people reach out to me, because I work with a lot of investors. I told you on Bigger Pockets, say I want to use hard money, but sometimes they don't know when's a good time. When would you say is a good time to use hard money, and when is it not to? And I'll piggyback that question with you mentioned you got into a quad, you were house hacking, you were living in it, if I'm correct. Right. Would you then still consider using hard money in a case like that versus conventional? When does it make sense?
No. You should always use conventional if it's an option. Hard money makes sense when you're buying a deal that can't qualify. So I could have got deals sooner if I'd went and chased deals that were like falling, which is what I chase now. Deals that are like dogs, like horrible deals, deals that you don't even want to walk in. If I had been chasing those and using hard money and using the buy, renovate, refinance method, I could have probably amped up a little quicker. That being said, man, we got so lucky. We bought in really good neighborhoods, really good times, and I'd be lying to everyone if I didn't say that luck had a huge amount to do with our success.
Yeah, but again, luck comes with action. So I'm glad you're talking about these processes and the journey. Right. One last thing before I go to the next point about the 40%, because I really love that topic. Yeah. You mentioned the burst strategy, and for those of us, again, stay plugged with Bigger Pockets. I think Bigger Pockets got to brand that word. Buy, renovate, rent, refinance. Right? Every time we drop it, I swear, kitching. I mean, honestly, if I had enough referrals, if I had an affiliate link with Bigger Pockets right now, I'd probably use it to have bought another property for sure, man. Yeah. But talk about, let's talk about that for a second. It's buy, renovate, rent, refinance. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So can you talk about how you could leverage hard money with a burst strategy, or could you or not, or should you?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you got a good deal on your hands, you should do whatever it takes to get the deal done. And I've always said, if you find the right deal, the money's easy. I mean, the reality is, if you find a knockout deal and you go with a small hard money guy, they'll fund 100% of it. If they look at it and they're like, oh man, this thing is golden, they're going to give you the money. Someone will give you the money. I'll give you the money. DM me. I'll give you the money. If you find something awesome, like, you can get the money. So, I wish I'd had that attitude a little bit more, but it's hard when you're starting. You don't have confidence in the deals you look at. I looked at deals, and I would underwrite these real conservative rents, and I was chasing 25, 35% cash on cash returns. It was like, if I had to step back and be like, what is 25? That's insane. Like, no one's getting 30% returns. So I was limiting my pool of deals to just these like few. Now I'm a fan of like, do more deals, right? I still want a good return. I'm still chasing healthy cash flow, but if that makes sense.
No, it does. on a more tactical note though, because I like people, you know, I want to make sure in the lab we get like practical information. So I think where I was getting at with that, just to go a little bit deeper on the Burr strategy on hard money, is it that you would buy with the hard money and then you would find a tenant to then still be able to cover that overhead that you have with those points?
No.
Exactly. So I want you to take a step back, because people might hear that and say, wait, hold on. So I'm gonna when do I pay back the hard money, right? At what point, right? So I want to hear talk about that.
So this is how you should do it. You find a great deal. You get the money, whether it's hard money, whether it's your rich uncle, whether it's, you know, someone on Bigger Pockets. You get the money. You buy the deal. You want to get out of that high interest as soon as possible.
Exactly.
So you want to get in a conventional. You can do 10 conventional loans, and then if you have a partner or spouse, you can do 10 more of them. So that's an important. By the way, just to slip this in here, don't both go on the loan when you're buying the house at the beginning. Don't you and your spouse or you and your partner both go on the loan. You want to do just one of you on the loan, because it'll lock up you'll lock up too many of your loans. And we're into that. And we're into that. Now, I use all mine. My wife's into hers, and you know and you want to have those.
That's a good problem.
Sweet debt. I mean, that is good debt. You know, 4.5%, 4% interest, 30-year fixed rate, no balloon. God, man, I wish I could have that all day long.
Right. And so when you're saying that to someone who's saying, hey, they're hearing hard money, how do I get out of it and then rent? I think that's what I want to hear. The part that I want you to bring home.
How do they get out of there?
How do they get out of the hard money and then find someone to rent? If I want to use hard money with the Burr strategy.
You find a trashy deal, you buy it with whoever's money, a hard money loan. You fix it up enough where it's A, going to be rent ready, and B, going to qualify for a loan, a conventional loan. So once you don't actually have to lease it, VTW. We actually do our refinances lots of times vacant, because we want them to appraise as high as possible, and you get some tenant that just moved in, and then you go for the refi, and the appraisers, you know, might appraise it a little bit low because it looks dumpy because someone's got their crap laying all over the place. So we actually try and slide the appraisal in right before it's leased, or maybe we have a pre-signed lease but the tenant hasn't moved in. We actually did 2 appraisals today. I mean, and both of them we did that on vacant appraisals.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, great. Thank you for bringing that home. Now I want to go back to that point of, okay, so how do we even put ourselves in that position the way, you know, you may have put yourself in the position, or the way a lot of the investors that come into this lab. I know I've seen this recently in your post, and I want to bring that home because we don't talk about that enough. The 40%, saving 40% of your own money. So when did you find that to be the most critical? Was that, you know, hindsight's 2020? Is that something you always went into? You know, what were you doing during those 2 years? You want to talk about that a little bit more and bring some light to the people as to why that's so important?
So I just did it. We did it from the beginning. The whole process for me is I wanted to buy real estate. And at the time, I didn't know any other way to get money outside of earning it and saving it. So that's what we did. We saved a bunch of our money, and then we bought more deals. And now I look at it and I see other people struggling. And so we don't, there's a little side note, but I'm bringing it back around. We do a lot of affordable housing. We got people, you know, applying for apartments where they got $1,400. They're making $1,400 a month, and they're making it. And then I talked to my buddy who's making $5,500 a month, and he's like, I can't save 40%. There's no way. I'm like, there is a way. You can save 40%. People use the word can't too loosely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they for sure. And honestly, I think the biggest thing is it goes back to financial literacy, and it talks about financials, right? Like we use financials to evaluate properties, but I don't think a lot of us are using financials to evaluate our current, like, general ledger. Like, you should know what's coming in and out of your bank account, because that's the only thing. That's the only way you'll be able to track. Like, you should know to the very T, like, what your expenses are monthly. And again, I'm a huge fan of Set for Life. I think it was Scott Strange. Is that what it is? That's a really good book for those of you guys. Bigger
But
pockets.
I think another, note on the savings is, and I was, my dad didn't know anything about money, but he somehow was interested in compound interest and showed me one of the compound interest calculators when I was young. And a lot of my entire business model is now based on this idea of when you invest money, it's creating more money. So I think if people were taught that from a younger age, when you save money, it becomes income. If you were told that for every $100 you save, you get $20 a year, it would just, everyone would be saving a lot more, because it would be like, oh, I don't have to get a raise. I can just save 20% of my income and then get a 5% raise because I saved 20% of my income. If people had more of that mindset, it's a little bit hard to wrap your brain around sometimes, I think, for people. But if we were taught about investing as income instead of investing as put your money in the stock market and touch it when you're 65, it would be a totally different conversation.
It is. And I find it so interesting because, I know you mentioned that like money is like farmers. I know you put that in one of your recent posts. And I think that's what I think another person, I think, was it MJ DeMarco? I think he was talking about how, every dollar is going to work for you, right? It's kind of like a soldier for your army that you got to put to work, which is essentially what I find fascinating with the house hacking is it's kind of, you mentioned it earlier, right? It's, if you can eliminate that one expense, the most expensive expense to the average of
38% of your income, of the average person income, goes to housing. If you can eliminate that, then you're saving 40%. That's it.
Wow, that's a raise right there. That's a raise that you've never gotten, right? Yeah, that's a fact.
Crazy. Yeah.
So, oh man, that's awesome. So right now in this, I want to talk about your transition, because you started with a quad, and you started to go for these really raw deals. It sounds like that you want to basically do a lot of value out of it. I've been seeing some of your stuff. Is that still the play for you? And people are going to ask the second question. They're going to ask, how are you finding these deals? Is it by yourself? Are you working with a team? Is it a realtor? Want to talk about that?
Yeah. So two things. First off, we are still buying the singles, duplexes, and that's what obviously they're smaller deals, so we're doing a lot of them. So you see that a lot on my Instagram and whatnot. But we also are buying apartment complexes, and we're under contract on a storage deal. We have an office building, a small office building. We're going to get another small office building. So we're buying. It's not about the asset type for me. It's about the return, and that comes back to that compound interest conversation. If you just if you look at that and really like play with that compound calculator, I mean, here's a good example. Say I had $5 million today. If I save that, and I'm 31, so 34, I'll be 65. So 34 years at 15% is like 650 million or something like that. I can't remember, 630 million. That same amount of years at 20% is 2.7 billion. So that 5% changes everything. So your threshold for return is paramount. So when I'm looking at property types, I'm looking at commercial, I'm looking at single families, multifamilies, everything. We have basically a little division that is buying single family kind of duplex. We really buy a lot of single family duplex or single family with a garage apartment or something like that. It's hard to make a single family in Dallas work as a rental.
Really? So you're more looking at the duplex, triplexes, quads in addition to larger scale? Because I'm looking at some of your stuff and you're showing like, and this is probably a great segue. You're looking at some crazy returns sometimes, like way, you talk about the 1% rule, but you're getting way more than that. So you want to talk about that as well as to?
Yeah. So first off, I want to tag on the 1% rule, and I need to get better about communicating this. Mm-hmm. The 1% rule is almost garbage. Like it's the worst deal you want to do is a 1% deal. If we're doing a 1% deal, it's completely stabilized, completely renovated in a market that we really like and feel like it's going to appreciate. That's the only way I ever do 1% rule. In fact, I've only ever done one deal, and it still was a little bit better than 1%.
Yeah, so just to bring that home is AJ is talking about he's getting better than 1% rule. That's like the worst case scenario. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. That's the backstop. So when someone that's why I'm like, and then I say that stuff, and then people still bring me deals that are like, $200,000 and rent for $1,500 a month. I'm like, no, like that's not it. That's not a good deal. So that's the backstop. If you're buying deals that are past the 1% rule, I would wager to say over the long term, you lose money on that deal. From a cash flow standpoint, you might, the appreciation might save you, but from a cash flow standpoint, you're going to lose money if you're buying worse than the 1% deal.
So that's interesting because I think we've always heard it, and I think where I first originally heard of this rule was from Bigger Pockets, and I think it all matters where you are and what kind of returns
Right,
you
what
can
market
get,
you're
and
in.
what market you're in, and what kind of properties you're going for too, right?
The
'Cause-
higher the rents, the better it becomes because your maintenance are the same, right? Your maintenance is the same on a $30,000 house as it is on a $300,000 house. So there are some fixed expenses. So the more expensive the property becomes, so you get to California or something, or you got some like crazy, $4,000 rents and stuff. Yeah, maybe the 1% rule makes some more sense. But also worth noting, Bigger Pockets, who does talk about the 1% rule a lot. When I started in 2013, they were talking about the 2% rule. That was the big conversation. They were everyone's talking about the 2% rule, and then somewhere along the way it was like people got desperate. And it was like 1.5%, 1.25%, 1%, and I'm like, people are gonna be talking about the 0.5% rule soon. That's my opinion.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, I don't know who one of the hosts is. I don't know if it's Brandon. Is it Brandon or whatever? Who's from Colorado, and that maybe that's part of it, right? Because that market, and that's the thing, right? It's like which different depends on your asset class, right? And you, again, what I really like that you brought home, it sounded like if you're gonna go for Class D and you're gonna do some value, you better be getting some crazy returns on the upside, right? I mean, is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. If I'm buying a Class D value add, I'm looking for 2%+ or 2% rule plus, even better. I would never buy a Class D deal that didn't. Yeah, but we have some Class D deals, so I can talk about that.
That's interesting. So bring it home a little bit. I guess based on the storage, the office, the single family, which one? You mentioned your numbers, guys. So there's no emotions there, and I like it. You always say, "Do the math."
You got
so if we're doing the math with you, AJ, do you have one that you feel like an asset class or a type of asset that you feel is you're more open to than other? If let's say the numbers are the same, actually.
The numbers are the same.
Yeah.
If the numbers were the same, I'd want a Class A triple nets retail lease, which I don't own any of them because the cap is going to be like a four cap on that. But you want something that's low maintenance if all the returns were the same, but they're not the same, right? So like the storage deal, we're under contract on. We don't own it yet. We're about to close on it. It's a high return deal, but it's a high risk deal. It's a huge value add, 50% vacant currently, built in the 1970s. Easements going all through the property. I mean, it's complicated. It's a complicated deal. So yeah, the return's good because it's high risk. That's the old economic law, right? The risk and return. There's a connection there. So
okay,
but in general, if I had to answer your question in a short way, I like residential. I think Rick Jarman's the one that says you own a house, rent a house, or you're living under a bridge. So people got to live somewhere. And that's not changing,
Gotcha.
I like the residential.
So what's your take on, because you're an interesting guy because you have a lot of different types of real estate and it seems like you're very focused on the numbers, which is fantastic. But I guess what would you say on the economies of scale? Because we have a lot of people who come in the lab who are in the multifamily space, and I know it's hot right now, and a lot of people are talking about. I mean, it's always been there; it's not going anywhere. But I guess you, who has multifamily apartments, single family, I guess, do you want to talk about the pros and cons if you see any, or is it just strictly numbers? Like what would you tell someone about
my
those?
question for people on that want it, and I know a lot of people, man, I've heard so many people, 2020, my goal is to buy my first multifamily or whatever. My question is why? Like, why do you want to buy the multifamily? Is it because you think you can get a higher return? Is it because you can, deploy more capital at once? Like, why is it that you want the multifamily? And I think that's where the question starts. There's both have advantages, right? And those are the advantage to multifamily is you can deploy a lot of capital at once. The disadvantage is the debt's not near as good, right? Unless you're getting a great, stabilized, awesome multifamily, which you're going to buy at some crazy, stupid low cap rate and with zero cash flow, then you're going to get like 20, maybe 25-year AM with a 5-year balloon, 5.5%, 6% interest. It's just not that good compared to a single family, which you can go get 30-year fixed rate mortgage. The single family, also an advantage is I can buy a single family that's trash, fix it in 3 months, rent it, refinance it, and recycle that capital, right? And that's a kind of a complicated concept, but you're recycling the money, right? So if I can BRRRR, or, buy and renovate and refinance a house 3 times in 1 year, I can deploy that capital 3 times. Well, the apartment deal, they're much more strict about how long has it been stabilized. Can you show me a P&L for 12 months before they want to do a refinance? So your money's stuck in that deal for, 12, 18 months minimum before you're going to be able to refinance it out. Now, the commercial guys invented BRRRR before biggerpockets existed. They've been doing that forever. So you can't do that. It's the same strategy when you go buy apartments. But I just think it's really important to ask why. I follow the return. If I can get a good return in multifamily, I'll buy it. If I can get a good return in single family, I'll buy it. I got both. If I can get storage, I'll buy that. I don't like office or retail too much because I think they're going to be vacant. But unless you get a triple, class A triple net lease on the retail.
So that's interesting because I don't really hear too many folks talk about I'm glad I asked the question because that's why I have you on the show right now, because you can kind of speak on both, but you don't really hear too much about the liquidity of it, right? Of like, like you said, like you can put your money to work 3 times versus on the apartment side it's kind of tied up because of just like you said, I got to see the rent roll, the P&Ls. That's really interesting. But would you say that the economies of scale, and I'm just thinking out loud here, I'm really thinking about what you're saying. This makes a lot of sense. Like you're thinking from your numbers perspective that you're better off getting your money, being more liquid on the single family side and continuing to scale that way, and the economies of scale of on the apartment side, depending on, I guess, the apartment, wouldn't necessarily be as great. But I guess, like you said, okay, that's interesting because it's all about what you're in it for. Like if you want to be more liquid, you want cash flow, you want to be able to pull money out, then do the single family. If not, if you're doing, you're willing to sit on it, do some value add. It sounds like on the apartment side, which is one of the many things that you could use, that you'd be just as well off as well. I mean,
Correct. Yeah. Okay. I mean, kind of. I want to control as much real estate as possible. Yeah. I love cash flow. I love cash flow. We have a great relationship. But where I've made more money than anywhere is appreciation. And how you get appreciation is controlling as much real estate as possible. Right? We control 13 million-ish in real estate or something. Mm-hmm. So if I get 2% appreciation on that, it's still an incredible return, right? So it's partially about controlling a lot. So when you're able to recycle that money multiple times in a year, I'm a math geek, so I'm going to hold them tight here. But say you're buying with 80% down with hard money. I mean, you have $20,000. And you recycle your $20,000 3 times in 1 year on a $100,000 house because you're doing 80% LTV, you're buying it with $20,000 using hard money, blah, blah, blah. You get it? Following?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm following.
So you now own $300,000 in real estate because you recycled 3 times, and that's assuming it didn't go up more. Theoretically it's gone up, right? You've created value somewhere in there, right? You take that $20,000 and you throw it at an apartment complex, and you own 1% of some tiny deal that you can only do 1 time. You're gonna own less. You're gonna own $100,000 worth of real estate with the apartment deal, and compared to $300,000 in 1 year. Does that make sense?
No, that's really.
It's a complicated idea, and you also have to be able to act very quickly to recycle that money. That's a big ask to do 3 deals in 1 year with the same money. That involves a lot of you being pretty quick.
Well, it goes back to your entire thesis about like putting your money to work for you. Like you're literally the farmers, right? Like the money, the opportunity cost, and the leverage. I mean, I think that pretty much like really sums up well of like what you're about and why you're always doing the math. That's really
when you're not raising money, you have to ask these questions. There's a fork in the road somewhere along your investing career where you decide if you're going to syndicate money or if you're not going to syndicate money. And personally, like if I'm really honest with myself, I got authority issues, and that's why I got into real estate in the first place. I don't want to answer to anybody. So syndicating money has never really been super appealing. I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. In fact, we've talked about it, but it's never been that appealing to me because I don't like answering to anyone. If I want to go like screw around all afternoon, I don't want some investor being mad that they saw me on Instagram skateboarding, right? Because I'm supposed to be like working for their money. So, there's a fork in the road for people. When they get to a certain size, they make that decision. I personally believe if you're a dedicated investor and you started young enough, you still got a chance to make a huge fortune without syndicating money. That's the math tells me that. the
Yeah,
math.
no, this reminds me of a gentleman I met at a recent meetup who was, I think he was 64? But he
Mhm.
started investing residential at 51,
Yeah,
and he had over 300 residential.
yeah,
This is in Atlanta, there in Fayetteville, Georgia. Shout out to Fayetteville. But I was like, that's interesting because it's all about the tool that you're using. And I think what's fascinating for us, a lot of our communities, there's a lot of millennials. Shout out to the millennials taking over the podcast right now.
yeah,
But and you talk about that a lot, right? The timing of it and the compound, and you're gonna have to drop us a link for the compound calculator
yeah.
because I want to make sure that everybody is starts using it, because I think it's really nice that you're able to really bring those numbers out and put it into perspective. Like, okay, cool, like. These are the kind of returns I can expect on a long term.
Right.
That's
It creates
really
a roadmap. It creates a roadmap.
roadmap.
Yeah, and also I think that there's a, you know, with the turn of the new decade here, I think it's important to talk about goal setting, because I see a lot of these people saying, oh, my goal is to do this or that. Math should be part of your goal, right? So if I have 5 million or 10 million in net worth, and I say, hey, my expectation is a 20% return on my money, then my expectation should be a $1 or $2 million, you know, if it's 5 or 10, say it's 10, you know, $2 million increase in net worth the next year. That's the goal. Now you can determine how am I going to get there. Now it's time to make a plan. But the goal should be based on math. When some random person comes out, oh, I'm going to own 200 units this year. What do you have now? Well, I got a duplex. Well, you haven't done the math, obviously. If you did the math, you'd know that that's likely impossible unless you're going to, you know, some place where you can buy units for really cheap places still, but, you know, most likely impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
So would you advise people to how if someone says is in here with us and say, okay, AJ, listen, man, this sounds great, but you know, how do I start doing the math? Where do I start? I know that sounds like a very simple question, but it really is. I think people need to ask themselves that question. Where do they start with their personal finances, with where they're currently at? Where do I start?
I mean, I think the very, very basics is you start by creating a budget and saving as much money as possible. And that's the very, very beginning. When you get $5,000, it's time to go. It's time to make action. But if you don't even got $5,000 to your name, the first step is saving. Once you got $5,000, then it's go find a duplex and house hack or quadplex and house hack. You can do it with $5,000. You can go find a quadplex and house hack in most markets outside of maybe the West Coast. So, you know, but if you don't have $5,000, that's the first step. And it's also important to recognize that if you have $5,000, but you got some dead-end job that you get paid $10 an hour, you're gonna have to get a cosigner. So you better, you know, fix your relationship with your parents or your uncle or whoever's gonna sign on that note with you, because you're gonna have to have income to prove that to qualify for the loan also.
Definitely, man. All right, that's awesome, man. Great service. So in the keeping it real section here, what's the biggest misconception that people that you think people have in their life or business, AJ?
About real estate or just in general?
Well, it's funny you say that, because here I always feel that you're a reflection. How you do real estate is probably a reflection of who you are. So that's actually an interesting question. I feel like whatever you have right now projects in your business. So that's just my take. But you can answer how you feel.
Well, I mean, I think people's biggest misconception is they've fallen victim to the world's marketing and publicity and everything else. So they think something's normal that's not normal. They think it's normal to graduate college and live just like their parents lived, right? Like they think it's normal to graduate college and their life's going to start where they saw their parents' life ending. You know, they think it's normal to go, you know, have a big house, get married and go buy a 3-bedroom house. Well, why not? Why? Who taught you that was normal? You know, I think that's a lot of my question for society is like, who taught us that this is the way we should be doing it? I don't know. I think it really is marketing, TV, whatever. I don't know. I think somewhere along the way, this is what we saw.
Yeah.
So we repeated it. I think that's silly. I mean, I think if people could just back up and say, hey, let's, you know, I'm gonna live with my parent. I'm gonna graduate college. I'm gonna move back home and I'm gonna make my college job. I'm gonna make $60,000 a year and I'm gonna save 50 of it. Why is that not normal?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think that's people's biggest mistake in terms of a misconception. I think speed, you know, it's a slogan. It's a get rich slow scheme. I've said it forever. You know, it's you know.
Are you saying you think that's a misconception or you think that's a fact?
I think it's a misconception. I don't think it's fast, right? I think that people believe you can get in any kind of business and then turn around and, you know, have a bunch of money in a second, be driving that car and living in that mansion or blah, blah, blah. That's not true. Listen, we got a bunch of rentals, and still from a cash flow perspective, you know, we're not making bukus. I'm not making $1 million a year in cash flow, right? I got a ton of rentals. I'm not making, you know, so I think people have this idea that, you know, I'm going to make all this money with this real estate game, and you might create a lot of net worth and you're creating value, but when it comes to residual passive income, it's a slow process.
So in other words, it goes back to your core values. Do the math. Yeah. And I know you talk about that in the, you know, your 40 and 50% rule, and talking about really factoring that into your numbers. Right. Not, you know, I think you called it expense performance, which I've never heard before, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. What do you think is the best advice you've ever received, or you've ever even picked up from your experience?
I don't know that I can say best advice. I think something I've implemented a lot this year, I think it's the old Marine saying is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I've implemented that a lot this year. I'm saying I'm not going to make decisions, you know, on the fly. I'm going to really back up, slow down, don't push me. I'm going to buy the deal if I want to buy the deal. Don't tell me I got to put it under contract in 30 minutes. I know that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. So I slowed down a lot on some of those decision making. Makes you a happier person too, it turns out. So that's been good advice. Also, just people. I was lucky to be encouraged in my boldness and I have a very high risk tolerance, and I was encouraged to kind of embrace that, and it's paid dividends. So, you know, I think that's another part of good advice I've been given.
That's awesome. Would you say there's a specific person in your life or someone that you've been, you know, inspired by or something that helped you kind of get that mindset?
I mean, I think one of my college professors, Dr. Bain, shout out UNT.
Yes, sir.
A lot of that. He was good. And in general, I believe in being mentored by your peers. So I have a huge community of other guys doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And, you know.
Mastermind. That's one of I think one of my biggest core values as well, is always surrounding yourself with people who are really kind of expanding and who are encouraging of your expansion as well. Right. I think that's a big deal, man. Right. That's awesome, man. Cool. Okay, cool. So we got the rapid fire questions right now, man. I want to hear a little bit about AJ, his background. You must be a reader, I assume. So do you have a favorite book or even a favorite podcast? What do you got for me?
It's funny you say that, because actually I'm chronically dyslexic, can barely read. I can read a little bit now, but my spelling is still garbage. And that's why I find it very funny, because the real estate community loves books. I mean, we talk about reading 60, 70 books a year. I'm like, God damn.
Yeah. But you read financials though. That's the thing.
I read the numbers and I like the math. Yeah. So I don't read. The Bigger Pockets was hugely, you know, influential. It was, you know, that's another part of the luck I talk about. It's just luck. I bought my first property in January 13, and Brandon and Josh started the podcast in January 2013. I mean, so I learned a lot through that.
Through listening to the podcast, right?
Listening to the podcast, yeah. So I great podcast they kind of. For me, I liked it better when they were interviewing like a bunch of grassroots guys that were like, I just got my first duplex, I'm pumped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they start doing like celebrities and stuff. I'm like, no one wants to hear Grant Cardone about this.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear that. So no, I want to bring that home, because we have a section that's, you know, favorite books. And I think what's really I want to take this as a learning lesson for everyone. Like, you know, you're saying you didn't let that stop you from learning. And you find a way to just a lot of people say, like, sometimes people say, hey, I don't read. Okay, great. Do you do Audible? Like, or do you know, podcasts? Like, there's just so much, I guess, out there that you can use to leverage. Or maybe you don't even do all those things because you don't even listen or have time, but you go out there to those meetups we were talking about. Right? Like, you just soak yourself in.
You know, from my peers. I will say the one thing that I think the readers have to be careful about is it can create analysis paralysis. I think
100%.
They dig into this stuff, they get it out. Listen, I've never read a book on real estate.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you brought up Grant Cardone because he's never read a book about real estate either.
Yeah.
So I think what we're there's enough to be said there about being a true practitioner. Getting your rolling up your sleeves and doing the damn thing, man. So
and also I wanted to say this is not that complicated. It's just not. There's a lot of great books, a lot of great tips, a lot of great strategies, and they're all worth learning along the way. But at the end of the day, it's not that complicated to buy a fullplex and live in it. It's not that complicated to buy a rent house that beats the 1% rule. If you buy a good deal, it is really hard to screw it up. I mean, when you buy a great deal, it's hard to mess it up. You can be an idiot and it's still going to make you money. So the most important thing is don't buy a bad deal. Find something that's going to cash flow and pay you every month.
That's right. What do you think is the best habit that serves you every day, AJ?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of hit on this earlier with the meetup groups, but just the habit of executing, of just doing it, like actually just doing it. Like, okay, my bill's due, I'll pay it. My car registration's behind, I'll fix it. I think people have somewhere along the way dropped the ball on just being able to complete something.
Yeah,
mow your own lawn and keep your house clean. You shouldn't buy rentals because
you're not ready.
You're not ready. No. So and that didn't come natural to me, by the way. I had to really, really work on that to be able to say, hey, I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing it. I'd love to sit around and watch Netflix, but I'm just going to do it right now. I'm just going to take care of it. It's going to be behind me. So I'd encourage people, the habits can be made. And then also another really important habit for me was because I was dyslexic and I had some weaknesses coming out of the gate, I think it was just diving into what you're really good at.
Yeah.
What you're good at and what brings results, and that's, I think, crucial.
That's a really good, man. I'm glad you brought that home because I think it's always progressive, like you said. It's always progressive. You're learning, you're getting better at it, and that's needed for sure, man.
Yeah.
Listen, I asked you this question. I want to hear the earlier, and I want you to touch on this. It's a rapid fire question: 1 300-unit apartment building or 3 apartments of 100 units?
So 1 300-unit apartment complex. Yeah.
Why is that?
It's just efficiency and management, I think. Yeah, put a maintenance guy on site, put a leasing agent on site. Yeah, I mean, either way, it depends. The answer is almost always it depends, but
yeah,
all things remaining equal, it's I think the 300 unit.
Well, I had to ask why, because you asked, if an investor wants an apartment, you would ask them why. So I had to ask you why, man. I had to bring it.
You said, I'm sorry, back up. You said one
300-unit apartment building or 3 apartments of 100 units.
Okay, yeah. I still choose the 300. If it was 300 houses, or a 300-unit apartment complex, I choose the houses.
Really? Okay, I'm glad we got that in there.
The houses were of equal value. Like, say you got $100,000 units and $100,000 houses. I choose the houses all day long. Yeah, for sure. Because this is important. This is, and this comes back to first off, you can completely game the system on appraising houses because a house is appraised on comps. But if you want them to do an income approach, you can kind of push them and be like, hey, look, like the rents are here, blah, blah, blah. You can push the appraiser a little more to get them where you want them. So the BRRRR becomes much easier.
Really?
Single family. And then if you do end up selling them, you got 2 outs, right? You can sell it on cap rate or you can sell it to, someone's first house they're going to buy out of college or whatever. So you have 2 exits and the valuation on emotion it becomes like, who knows, right? So I might have a house that I would sell at a 7 cap, but maybe Billy just graduated college and loves it, and he doesn't even know what a 7 cap means because he majored in philosophy, and he says, I'll buy the house for $400,000, and that would have been a 2 cap, right? So the valuation can be different depending on what angle you're looking at it from. So that's why that's another reason I like single family is better in some ways.
So you're not even looking at the appraiser as a limitation. You're more looking at it as a friend, as a partner on this. That's
look,
interesting.
When I go get a deal, so we went and did an appraisal today, and I bring the comps. I say, hey, these are the comps that I think are appropriate. This is why I think they're appropriate. And this is beforehand, right? No, this is at the appraisal, at the actual appraisal. Yeah, before the appraisal, before he does the pictures and stuff. Yeah, I'll say
That's
this.
interesting. So is that one of your hacks, or you would say, or because I'm not know that all investors do that. I don't
Well,
know.
all of them should do it because listen,
Yeah.
when you get that cash out,
Mhm.
man, that's half the game. If I can buy, if you can get more than just the cash you put in out, and here's what happens. Most time you kind of get right around what you put in back. And then once in a blue moon, the appraiser appraises super high, you did a really good job, you found a great deal, I don't know, something happens, and then they give you like an extra 70 or something out of it. Well, now you're cooking with a stick of dynamite. The deal might not cash flow that much anymore, but it doesn't matter because you're paying 4.5% interest on it, and you're going to go deploy the money at 10% interest or at 12% or 15% cash on cash return. So you're getting that spread between the debt and what you deploy to that, right? So
Yeah.
I don't care. I got a couple deals that are cash flow negative, but I took the cash from the refinance, and I bought an apartment complex with it, or a storage deal with it, or whatever.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we started with, I talked about, this is actually important to know, right? So we started with I think 20,000 ish. My wife actually sold, she was into the horseback riding dressage. She sold a horse and got us an extra 15. So we got this fourplex with that money. And then we put her salary away for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, 3 years. And then we never put any other money into the business ever again. That's it. So whatever it was, we probably put 150-ish into it or something. All the rest of it has just been the BRRRR, refinance, cash flow, whatever. And we have, 182 doors or something now. So we essentially bought 182 doors with 150 grand. I mean, that,
Yeah.
That's
and it makes sense now because of how you're always thinking about taking your money out and putting it to work. I think we don't even talk about this enough, and this is why this is going to be fascinating for a community because, again, you talked about it in the beginning, what we're being fed, what we want sometimes, what we hear, but right now we got a practitioner in the lab who's not listening to what he hears, he's looking at the numbers,
right.
and the liquidity, and I'm really glad you really honed in on that, and that made that really the core of this conversation. Because I haven't heard of that. I mean, I'm surrounded by a bunch of multifamily guys. What do I know, right? So so that was dope, man. That was really good. You really brought that home for me, and that's that. I think it's really important to think about what you said, the why.
Yeah.
Man, so this was awesome, man. So listen, where can the people find out more about you, and what do you want to get from this as a call to action? Because I surely want to bring people your way and continue. I think you're doing a really good job of educating the community. Clearly, you're probably on Bigger Pockets from our conversation, but where else can folks find out more about you?
Yeah, really the best place to connect with me is Instagram. Facebook's fine too, but Instagram's where I post a lot of what I'm doing in the business and stuff. And I think my call to action be specifically if you're in Dallas, we do these meetups and they're freaking great. I just two deals off last meeting. 2 different guys closed deals off the last meetup.
Yes, sir. Me too.
So,
and guess where I started from? Bigger Pockets, man. That's why I posted my first meetup.
We're doing this is a new concept, and people are going to steal it after I share it on here, but it's okay. We're doing a co-working space designed specifically for real estate people.
Nice.
And so we're trying to get that meetup is connected to that co-working. We're opening next month with that. So it's and the idea is basically bringing these people together on a daily basis. How does that change things? And we're trying to get a lot of the consultants kind of carry the heavy lifting on the money side because they're getting the title companies, mortgage people. They're getting the money out of it too, wholesale.
Nice.
It's a cool community, and we'll see in a year if it's successful or not from a networking standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what you should do is definitely send me we'll include that in the show notes because I want to make sure that people are listening if they're from Dallas. I think they'll be very 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 helpful and resourceful for them. So, man, thank you. AJ Ramler was in the building. Drop some bombs, drop some knowledge, and man, you guys make sure you check him out. So, where can we find you again? Social media. What are your handles? Make sure
AJ Ramler.
AJ Ramler.
Yeah.
And just like that, you dropped knowledge. You came, we saw, we conquered. Thank you, AJ, for coming through. And just like that, we are out.